Chapter 5 is about epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissues. It's just made up of many cells that look similar and carry out similar functions. Here are the different types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Before we go into tissues, this slide is about the connections between the cells. Tight junctions. These connections prevent the passage of fluids between the cells, so that you don't want any leakage of fluids to go in between. Desmosomes, these form spot walls. Also, these are really more for preventing the cells from coming apart from each other. So this is really to prevent the tearing of tissues. Then the gap junctions, these are little gates between the cells. So they're tubular channels so that molecules, for example, nutrients, can move from one cell to another. We're going to start with the epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues cover our organs, body surfaces lining the cavities. They also make up our glands. They have a free surface on the outside, basement membrane on the inside. Do know that they don't have blood vessels, usually lack blood vessels, because here the cells are very tightly attached to each other. There's just no room for blood vessels to go in between. Here the cells do divide very often, and let's underline this part too. As I said before, cells are tightly packed in epithelial tissues. Here, these epithelial tissues, the cells have different shapes. If they're flat shaped, it's called squamous. Cuboidal would be the cube shaped, and columnar are the long, tall cells. And also the tissues can be simple, meaning one layer, or stratified, two or more layers. Pseudostratified means that it appears like it's many layers, but it's not. Okay, so now here are the different types of epithelial tissues. Simple squamous tissue. Know that this is made up of just a single layer of flat cells. Because the cells are very flat, it's easy for substances, molecules, nutrients, gases, to diffuse through the cells, to pass through membranes. Know that simple squamous tissue lines the air sacs, also called alveoli. It also lines capillaries, blood, and lymph vessels. And so know the function for the simple squamous is diffusion of substances. Next type, simple cuboidal. This is made up of a single layer of cube-shaped cells. Know the function is secretion and absorption. And here this tissue lines the kidney tubules. It also covers ovaries. And you can also find it in the ducts of some glands. Simple columnar. Now this tissue is made up of a single layer of long cells. Here the nuclei are at the bottom parts of the cells. At the top of these cells, there may be these extensions called the microvilli. So these microvilli are important for absorption of nutrients, for example. Know the function is the secretion and absorption. And here this tissue lines the uterus, stomach, and intestines. Stratified squamous, this is made up of many cell layers. Because of that, it acts as a protective covering. The top cells are flat, but the upper or the bottom cells, are more round. Here the locations is the skin, inside of our mouth, meaning the oral cavity, vagina, and anal canals. Pseudostratified tissue. This tissue is actually a single layer of cells, but it looks like many layers. Here the cells have these more triangular shapes, as you can see in this picture. But here the cells, some might be right side up, some might be upside down. These spots that I'm putting here is a nucleus inside the cells. Also, these cells have extensions at the top called the cilia. These cilia are much longer than microvilli, and so here these cilia are actually helping to move substances across the cell surface, such as mucus. Okay, so here, put a star by the third bullet point. Know that this tissue often has cilia and goblet cells. Goblet cells are cells in between these triangular cells. For example, we can see in this picture. Here, goblet cells have a more shinier appearance. But yeah, so know that goblet cells make mucus, and the mucus traps pathogens. And so here, this tissue helps to protect from infection. Know that it lines the respiratory passages, such as trachea. It's also found inside the nose. Next type of tissue is transitional tissue. This does have many cell layers. It's different than the stratified squamous because here the top cells are round. But with stratified squamous, the top cells were flat. So here we can underline the cells at the top are dome-shaped. This tissue allows for stretching. The locations are the bladder, ureters, and part of the urethra. Right, then some of the epithelial tissues, for example, stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar that we didn't cover, some of those form glands. Glands are just made up of cells that are secreting substances, either into ducts or into blood vessels. Know that there are two types of glands. Endocrine glands, they secrete their products into blood or lymph vessels, versus exocrine glands. For example, sweat glands, salivary glands, they secrete their products into ducts. Ducts are like little tubes. Now, it's interesting that the pancreas is both an endocrine and exocrine gland. Now, usually glands are either, but here pancreas is both. And let me just explain here. The pancreas has the endocrine function because it releases its hormones, insulin and glucagon, into blood vessels. Okay, so that's endocrine. But the pancreas also makes digestive enzymes, and here these digestive enzymes are traveling inside this duct, which is the green part that you see here. And so because it's also using a duct, that's its exocrine functions. And so glands are made up of cells. Cells are the ones that are actually making the product, whatever they are, the enzymes, the hormones. Here, this slide is talking about how the products are released from the cells. Merocrine secretion. This means that the products are released through exocytosis. And so exocytosis meant when the products are first put into vesicles, but now the vesicles go up to the surface of the cell, they open up, and whatever was inside is coming out. Next type of secretion is apocrine. Here, the top portion of the cell is shed. You can see on this picture. And so then whatever was in that part of the cell then comes out. And so this could be different products. Now the example for this is the apocrine sweat glands that we're going to talk more about in the skin chapter. But yeah, these glands are in our armpit and also pubic regions as well. Then the third type of secretion that the cell of a gland could perform is that here the entire cell ruptures and whatever was inside comes out. And this is done by sebaceous glands. Alright, so know what these types of secretion methods are about, what's happening with the cells. Next, we're going into the connective tissues. This is the most abundant tissue type. Here, the cells are actually farther apart than epithelial cells. So with epithelial tissues, the cells were tightly packed together, but here connective tissues, there's space in between the cells, and there's matrix between them. There are different functions for the connective tissues. Of course, main function is to connect, bind structures together. They provide support, protection, surface frameworks, fill spaces, store fat. Say we're going to talk about adipose tissue, that's fat tissue. And producing blood cells as well. And that's for red marrow. And we'll see also they protect against infections because there are white blood cells inside. And another one, help repair tissue damage. We're going to talk about that with inflammation. Okay, so in between the cells there's space, but really in the space there's the extracellular matrix. But what does that mean? The matrix just means that outside of the cells there are protein fibers, for example collagen fibers, elastic fibers, there are also reticular fibers, and there's also ground substance. Ground substance is kind of like the liquid part. So this liquid part though can be fluid to semi-solid to solid. Most connective tissues have good blood supply and they are well nourished. And here, many of the cells in connective tissues can divide. Next here, we're going to talk about what cells are found in connective tissues. Fibroblasts. These are the ones that make the fibers. They also make the ground substance. So that's what the word means, the name. Fibro meaning fiber, and then blast. Blast means to build, make. Okay, so for this one, let's underline that they secrete, meaning make, fibers into the matrix. Also in connective tissue, there are macrophages. Now, they might be attached to fibers or they're able to move around, wander around, looking for pathogens. They conduct phagocytosis, meaning they're able to engulf or eat bacteria, other pathogens. And so they're defending against infections. Another type of cell that we might find in connective tissues is mast cell. These are actually fixed cells, so know that these have two functions. They release heparin. Heparin is to prevent abnormal blood clotting. And they also release histamine, and know that that's for inflammation.